Hello, Dreamcatchers, and welcome to the Writer's Haven. I am your host, Helena, and this is part 2 of our 2-part series on the book Water in a Broken Glass. In part 1, we spoke with Odessa Rose, the author of this wonderful work of literature. She spoke about her approach to the writing of this novel and gave insights on her creative process. Water in a Broken Glass was Odessa's first novel, and it was optioned into a film by the same name that was produced by our next guest, Jamelle Williams-Thomas. Jamelle joins me and Odessa to talk about her creative process in producing a cinematic version of the book, which premiered in Baltimore, Maryland on March 1st. Join me in welcoming Jamelle to the Writer's Haven.
Thank you for having me.
Well, welcome, welcome. So we just had a great discussion with Odessa, who talked about her whole process in creating this wonderful book of fiction. And so we want to definitely get your way in on the process of making the film. But first, let's start off with how you came into connecting with this book and Odessa.
So that was, it was kind of crazy. One of my friends from college had told me that, I need to read this book. I don't know how it came up in conversation, but she said, you need to check this out. And so I read it, and then I read it again, and I read it again, and I read it again. In the span of like a month, I had read it 3 or 4 times. And I was still in film school, had a lot of ambition, but really didn't know what I was doing. But I said, you know what, I'm going to try and track her down, and I'm going to ask. And so I finally got her information about a couple years after I had gotten out of school, and I emailed her and I said, I know this is probably a long shot. I know that someone has already taken this and run, because this is amazing. And it was right around the time where people were constantly adapting books into novels, and so I thought, there's no way that someone doesn't already have the rights to this. But I emailed her, and about 2 months later, she emailed me back. And she said, wow, no one, I can't believe that, you like my book that much. And I had sent her, screenplays that I had written and films that I had worked on. And I was like, please like me so that I can, use your story. And it was just convenient because I had gone to film school out in California. I was back home in Maryland, where I'm from, and she was right in Baltimore. So we went to, it was Paper Moon, you're right. We went to Paper Moon, and we sat down and we really talked about it. And she luckily trusted me with a very long journey, but well worth it.
Okay, and what was it about the book that just had you so entranced and you just had to turn this into a production?
So I think as a filmmaker, when I read something, I'm always kind of playing it out in my head. And adapting a book was never kind of part of my dream of, of filmmaking, but the book was so descriptive, like the imagery, that it just seemed effortless in the book, and that these characters were so well developed and so complex. And, just reading it, I felt, things like in situations where, Tanya was in conflict, I felt conflicted, or I felt nervous or scared for her. There were times that I felt intimidated by some of the characters, and I thought, that's it. Like that's what it is, and I need to put this to screen. Like people need to feel the way that I'm feeling reading it.
So you took the book and made a screenplay out of it. So talk to us about your writing process in producing the screenplay.
So it started off a very, very, very long script.
Epic.
Right. Well, because, this was my first time adapting any kind of previous work into something. And, I had to make sure that I was including everything, and I wanted to make sure that it encompassed the whole film. And as the drafts progress, because I'm always a student, and so I'm always learning about the writing process and learning about, how stories work and how that translates to the screen. And I settled on, the one big thing that I had to do was take ownership. Yes, I'm paying, homage to this wonderful story, but it has to be my story now. And once I was able to do that, and once I was able to figure out, whose story I was telling, because all the characters are great, but obviously it's Tanya's story. And in a film, we don't have 400 pages, or not that your book's up. We don't have 400 pages to really, flesh out everything, and so we need to be precise, and we need to be succinct in how we're progressing the story along. And so, we had brought on, I brought on other writers to assist, and at a certain point, the script was going in a direction that, I felt wasn't authentic to the story. And so, that was a learning experience for me to have to step back and say, okay, no, this is not where we want to be. This is not Tanya's story. And so we kind of went back to the drawing board, and I co-wrote it. And we were able to really capture the essence of what the book was. And Odessa was happy, so,
That's important.
I was, as long as she was happy, I was happy.
Okay. How challenging was it to... So there's the script that became the final draft, which, we know once you're in production, things change. Then editing, things change. And it's 110 minutes, I think I read.
Yes.
Somewhere. So how challenging was it to, in that process, from the writing of it, the production of it, and then the post-production and editing, to actually ensure that, as you said, the authenticity of the initial spirit of the book into film, to engage that? How was it challenging, I should say?
No. And if I can invoke my Patronus, Ava DuVernay, really quickly, I was able to attend her keynote speech at South by Southwest a couple of years ago, and one thing she said really stuck to me. It was serve the story. I'm the type of person, where I want to work with people who are passionate about what they do, who love their craft, not just what they're doing, but the craft. And so I talked a lot through creative things with my cinematographer, with the fashion, the costumer, the production designer, like all of those things, had to make sense. They had to serve the story. And so, I was able really to let the script go to the actors, because, I wanted them to have ownership over this. I mean, this is a collaborative effort that we're producing something together. And so, there were times that a line changed or we blocked it differently. And, it was never an issue for me because, at the end of the day, my job is to serve the story. Hashtag Ava Patronus.
Right.
But call me. But yeah, no, it wasn't. It wasn't challenging. I trust people to do their jobs. I stay in my lane, and I let them, drive in theirs.
Okay. What were some of the challenges that you had, or were there any challenges in the actual production? In the actual production of the film.
So we were small production, low budget. There were the biggest problem, or the biggest challenge, I guess, wasn't necessarily a problem because it worked out really well, was finding a satin. We were probably like 2 weeks into shooting, and we still hadn't casted a satin. She's kind of important.
Yeah.
So we had brought someone up to play the role, and we had her on set. We were shooting, and halfway through, I was like, guys, I'm wasting my time and your time and hers. It's not going to work. And we had paused the production. We had, for casting reasons, we had paused the production back in May, and so when we were resumed in September, there was just kind of this looming thing, like, oh my God, we're gonna have to stop production again. Like, it's just gonna be devastating. And the day before, the literal day before we were to shoot Satin scenes, like we rearranged the schedule. We couldn't push them anymore, so it had to be that day. I saw Tawny Belafonte's audition tape. We had a Skype conversation. We had a Skype chemistry read because she was in New York at the time. And we put her on a bus overnight to Baltimore. I picked her up from the bus station, and we went directly to set, and I said, well, you've had the script for 2 hours. We're going to start with you. I hope you got everything. No, but to her credit, Tawny is a phenomenal actress, and, with very little preparation, she nailed it. We did talk a lot about who Satin was as a person, but, I can't take any credit for that. That was all her.
Wow, that's an amazing story, actually, and how it came
scary.
together. Yeah, scary, but you rose to the occasion, and that's what's most important. Okay, so you meet Odessa. She gives her blessing, and the publisher gives his blessing. You write the screenplay, which, did you tell us how long it took? Co-wrote the screenplay.
Yes. So I didn't actually bring on a co-writer until around 2013. By that time, I was on like draft 7 or 8 or something like that. So 10 drafts later, we got something that everyone was happy with.
And it took how long from cradle to grave, just the screenplay?
7 years.
Okay. And it's so important to bring that up because there are filmmakers, aspiring filmmakers who, may be discouraged because it's taking them so long. And one of the things that I had heard, although I need to fact check it, is Avatar and the writing of Avatar, and that it took 8 years to write. And part of that was research too. Part of that was research, which you did little research, right? Because you had your guide completely in the book. Was there anything in the book that once you saw it in your mind's eye for film that you wanted to change or that you did change? A small or large, whatever it is?
No, I really thought, well, one, I was surprised that we found the locations that we did. We had an
Baltimore.
Yes, we had an awesome location scout, Ryan Bowen, and he was just amazing. And a lot of what we picked, just fit. It was just coincidentally awesome. Tanya and Nikki's apartment was just like out of a Pinterest commercial, and that was someone's actual apartment. That's where they lived, and it was this beautiful, already set up place. So we really lucked out. And there wasn't a moment where, I was filming, or even when I was, thinking back to the book, that I thought, no, this doesn't feel right. I think that having the screenplay in the back of my mind, but also having the story in the back of my mind allowed, me to really convey to even Ryan, like, hey, this is the feeling that I'm looking for. And he was able to deliver.
Okay, so although you had artistic license and you felt comfortable in that, you saw it and said, there's not even really much that...
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Great place to be, actually, in that situation. And I'll tell you a story. I won't do it now because I really want to spend the time to talk about your project. But there's a film that actually is going to come out next week. And in the discussion with the author and with the filmmaker, didn't have him on the show. We'd love to have him on the show, but that's a conversation for another day. There were instances in that filmmaking process where they made changes and the author wasn't necessarily okay with it, but you know, it's a situation where once it leaves that space of actually writing the book and it moves to another creator and then another creative. And I mean, the spirit of the book was there, and I would say most of everything was intact, but there were just some things that they saw. So let's talk about what ended up on the editing room floor. Anything that, you know, so you have it at 110 minutes. Of course, you shot more film than that. Is there anything that ended up on the editing room floor that you wish had made it into the piece?
No. You know, I think that, you know, my editor and I have known each other for a very long time, and we generally operate on the same page. And so, you know, going through and discussing what really belonged, you know, the things that were cut, you know, were appropriately cut. There was one, so I can't give it away, but there's one moment where there's like an improv kind of going on, and you know, being on set and filming it, it was hilarious. And I think that if we had more time, or if it were more significant to the story, we probably could have left it in. But at the end of the day, you know, the pacing as it was didn't really allow for us to kind of put that in, and I think we would probably only be the ones laughing anyway. But
okay, that's great. So Odessa mentioned that she came on the set every day. And so how was that for you, that experience as the filmmaker? Were you nervous about her being there? Were you happy, ecstatic, or how did you experience her presence?
I loved it. Odessa knows she's like a second mom to me. So it was like having, you know, my mom on set, and you know, it was also like it made me feel good knowing that how happy she was. You know, there were a couple times she came to me, she was like, Jamelle, this is crazy. I can't believe. And it's funny because a couple of times you know, the actors and I we'd be talking and we'd be laughing about what they had to do, and I would say, blame her, she wrote it. She did it. I just pulled it into the screenplay. But no, it was great, and I can't imagine, you know, I think for me, you know, watching it, you know, was like, oh my God, like this is kind of my work, you know, that's out there. You know, and having 6 weeks of exposure to that, like that's incredible, you know, and I'm glad that I could, you know, provide that. Like she can come on my set anytime, even if I'm not doing her book. Just come by. It's okay.
Okay, so let's talk about the budget. And Odessa had mentioned that when you guys met, you had a estimate or a budget already prescribed for the film, which probably changed a number of times.
Yes.
How did you raise the funds?
So a lot of it was crowdfunding. A lot of it was my own money. A whole lot of it was my own money. And you know, we still have you know, balances and things to settle, but you know, it's an indie film. It happens.
Right.
You know, it had just gotten to the point where, you know, I felt like, okay, I'm in a good enough position where, you know, I can kind of take this risk. And so the initial budget, when I first approached Odessa, I think I gave you like 2 different budgets. And I want to say the lowest was like $400,000 or something, you know, ridiculous. And we ended up settling on a budget of about $125K. And I would say we're still probably around that. But I mean, for the amount of money or lack thereof, you know, I think that everybody just, you know, they just believed in the project. And I think that's really what made the difference.
Just cinematically, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Artistically done. And to know some, you know, because we talked a little bit before we started the taping about the production of it. It's just very, very well done. And that backstory, and I looked at the trailers that you sent. I'm like, wow, really? Really? You know, you just talked about the apartment. It was just very well done, and I can't wait till others see it and that it's out there and you can just really realize the fruits of your labor. Now, we know that Ava is one of your favorite people. Are there any other filmmakers that you pay homage to, that you appreciate their work, that we may see as an audience some of those influences?
So my favorite directors, Gina Prince Bythewood is one of my favorites. I love the way that she kind of captures story. And I think a lot of my favorite directors, they immerse you kind of in their worlds. Like, you almost forget that you're in a movie because that you're watching something because you're just kind of in it. And I think that I take a lot of like direction from them. In terms of how they tell the story, and you know, I just kind of tweak it to, you know, what works for me. But definitely Gina is one of them. Chris Nolan, Ryan Coogler, who's just ridiculously amazing, you know, and Ava, and Darren Aronofsky. Oddly enough, I think that it's so weird, but I you know, I think when I think about his films. You know, he, more than probably anyone I have seen, really makes you forget that you're a person outside of what you're watching. It's really creepy, but the feeling, you know, it's I love it. Like, I would love to do that. You know, I would love to kind of invoke that in my audience. So.
Okay. Now, this is your first feature?
Yes.
Okay. So this question is actually for both of you. What's next?
You know,
you go first.
It's so funny. They asked us that at the premiere, and we didn't answer the question.
Neither one of us.
Oh, wow.
Nope.
Are you not going to answer it today?
Not on
either?
purpose. It was just like so much was going on, and I saw the video, and I said, Jamelle, you know, we never answered that question.
So, well, you know, in the meantime, between time, we've entered some festivals, so we're hoping to hear back from a lot of them that we were selected. You know, we're gonna try as a crew, as a cast and crew, to make a lot of them, and you know, really, that's it. You know, I think that, you know, for me, like, I'm always looking to kind of hone my craft when I'm not actually shooting. And so I'm working on some things.
Okay.
That, you know, will very likely not be an official thing until like a year or two from now. Plus, I just had a baby boy. He was born March 26th.
Awesome.
So
Congratulations.
yes, thank you. So I'll be enjoying being a mom and changing diapers and all of that for a little bit.
Okay. Okay. Are you going to answer the question this time?
I'm working on my, I'm shopping Kismick's journey around because I want to get an agent this time. And I'm working on my 4th novel. So that's what I'm doing now.
That I also have dibs on.
She has dibs on everything.
She has just in case you didn't know.
Right.
Okay. And what words of wisdom would you give for you, Odessa, aspiring authors, for you, the Jamelle, the filmmakers that are out there listening to this broadcast? What advice would you give them?
Just write from your heart, and don't be afraid to tell your story, and tell it as honestly as you can, because that's what matters.
Jamelle?
God, you had that. You had to get all profound. I would say, you know, if it's something you love, don't give up. You have to keep pushing. You know, there were definitely times where, you know, I called Odessa and I'm like, I'm done. I just want to quit, you know.
Yeah.
Because it can get frustrating.
Yeah.
But, you know, you really have to follow your heart. Like, if it is something that is just eating away, that you have to scratch that itch. Like, do whatever it is you have to do, but scratch, you know, if it takes a year, 10 years, 12 years, you know, just do it. Just keep working. You know, it's hard to break the human spirit. And I think that as long as you're honest with yourself and you respect your craft, you know, you're going to be successful one way or the other. That would be my advice.
Okay. Boom.
I know, I was like, what are you talking about? I'm glad I went first.
Well, I want to thank both of you for your time and coming on the show and sharing your experiences and sharing this project. And I look forward to seeing more from both of you. Definitely invite me to the premiere that's coming up. Film festivals, I want to hear about all of that. Definitely, I'm going to post it on Facebook and all of our social media sites so that we can see your film, and particularly with the theme being as it is, I think that it's a very, very important story and that people need to come out and see that. So Dreamcatchers, that wraps our two-part series in the writing and producing of a literary and filmatic version of Water in a Broken Glass. I hope you enjoy the golden nuggets from author Odessa Rose and filmmaker Jamelle Williams-Thomas. And you can catch both of them on social media. So you follow their continued artistic journey. You are on social media?
Yes.
Yeah, I know Odessa is.
I am.
Jamelle is too.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Thank you. And?
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Okay.
Mainly Facebook.
Okay, okay. Next week, you are in for a treat. I will have three poets, Monda Webb, Charles Stokes, and Hermond Palmer, back in the Haven to discuss their work and creative process. You may remember Monda and Charles from season 1 and Hermond from earlier this season. We're going to have a blast, and you don't want to miss it. And speaking of missing it, if you missed any of our shows, you can catch them on YouTube, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Sonos, Alexa, SoundCloud, and Spotify. Just search for us under the title The Writer's Haven Show with V. Helena so we can stay connected. See you next time in the Haven, and until then, catch fire on purpose.
Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.